Republican leader Mitch McConnell on Capitol Hill Thursday, just after he apologized to President Zelensky for the delay passing the $61 billion aid package for Ukraine. Leader McConnell acknowledged to us the 6-month process, 4 in the Senate, was a costly delay for the Ukrainian war effort. In the time of the delay, Russia's military land forces have grown back to where they were before the invasion. The army's 15% larger, and they've reinforced the 20% of Ukrainian territory that they hold. These are all the words of the Supreme Allied Commander himself. Do you feel your party is responsible for those setbacks?
Many of them, yeah. We took too long. This issue was like a family reunion, if you will, with a lot of different points of view being expressed around the table. All the Democrats were for Ukraine. There's no question that the debate was in our family, on our side, and there was a lot of skepticism for a long time, but I think it got better. And I think we proved that earlier this week.
What do you think changed minds?
The actual facts. Once we realized we were not going to get a border result, I think our members really started focusing on the package. It was clear then it was not going to have a border provision attached to it. And there are almost no good arguments against this. Every argument that was made by the opponents is provably wrong. And the facts, I think, were convincing for a number of our members, and they changed their minds.
You are leader for another 8 months, but you've said you're going to stay and serve out your term. Donald Trump may again become president. According to our latest CBS polling, 79% of self-identified Republicans told us that the source of information they most trust on Ukraine and Russia is Donald Trump. This sentiment doesn't seem to be disappearing. How are you going to counter that?
What I want to do and what I've focused on is not the presidential race, but getting the Senate back.
But this isn't the race. This is persuading public opinion.
Yeah, I think the single most important thing I can do is make sure my successor is the majority leader, no matter how the presidential election comes out. I think the fact that our nominee basically decided not to continue whipping people against the package was a good sign. And I'm going to be advocating increasing the defense budget, no matter who gets elected, and preparing ourselves for the long term, which is China, Russia, and Iran. This administration budget requests for defense haven't even kept up with inflation.
You said the Republican nominee decided not to whip against the package. In other words, stop telling lawmakers that not to vote for it. But we know Donald Trump is not a fan of Zelensky. Viktor Orban, the prime minister of Hungary, recently had dinner with Mr. Trump at Mar-a-Lago and then told reporters that Trump said he won't give a penny to Ukraine, and that'll be the way he forces an end to the fighting. If that's the fundamental belief of the man who's going to be commander-in-chief, how do you stop him?
What I'm doing is trying to change the Senate so that we have a majority, no matter who wins the presidential election. I can't control that. I have some influence here in the Senate. I intend to use it, no matter who gets elected president, to increase our defense budget and get ready for the challenges that we have ahead of us.
But that's a challenge where you might have to be the firewall against your own party and its leader again.
I've been willing to do that. I had something to do with changing opinion in the Senate on this issue, and I think a lot more of my members now understand the importance of it.
About a month after January 6th, you voted to acquit Donald Trump after he was impeached. And you said on the Senate floor, Trump
didn't get away with anything yet. We have a criminal justice system in this country. We have civil litigation. And former presidents are not immune from being accountable by either one.
Do you still believe that former presidents are not completely immune from liability?
let's put it this way. I addressed that issue on February the 13th
It's active before the Supreme Court as we speak.
and January the 6th of 2021. I stand by everything I said then. Obviously, it'll be up to the Supreme Court to decide whether I was correct.
Part of what you said is part of this case in some ways, because you argued for the Senate not to convict Mr. Trump. And central to his immunity argument is the claim that a former president who was impeached and convicted by the Senate can be criminally prosecuted. He was not. Do you regret your choice? It's part of the defense.
I don't regret anything I said then. I haven't taken anything I said then back, but the answer to your question is going to be in the courts. The Supreme Court's going to decide that.
So you stand by your description of Trump as practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of January 6th and potentially criminally responsible and liable.
I don't know how many times you're going to ask me the same question. I stand by everything I said on January 6th and February 13th of 21.
Well, I'm asking you the question because since the past few months have passed in our last conversation, you've endorsed him for re-election.
You need to get better research. I was asked that question 3 years ago. If he were the nominee, would I support him?
And you said you would support
And
whoever
I
the
said
nominee
yes,
was.
because the voters of my party across the country have made a decision. As the Republican leader of the Senate, obviously I'm going to support the nominee of our party.
But you have taken stands on issues you feel are of strong national security interests and morally imperative. That was your argument on Ukraine. And that you were bucking, in some ways, a populist opinion. So on this one, I'm just wondering how you explain that when you say it was good enough for a number of Republicans that he be the nominee. Because that is the populist opinion. It's not taking the position that he has, he doesn't live up to the role.
The issue is, what kind of influence, even if I'd chosen to get involved in the presidential election, what kind of influence would I have had?
You're one of the most powerful Republicans.
I'm the Republican leader of the Senate. What we do here is try to make law. I like us to be in the majority.
Your worldview seems more aligned with Joe Biden when it comes to American leadership in these global conflicts than with Donald Trump,
I certainly
who has
wouldn't have.
spoken against Volodymyr Zelensky, who has not endorsed the package that you just worked so hard to get over the finish line.
Look, I wouldn't have withdrawn from Afghanistan. I wouldn't have submitted 4 budgets in a row for defense that don't even keep up with inflation. I got plenty of differences with the current administration. Whether I will have differences with the next administration remains to be seen. I know what I think, and it doesn't make any difference what the outcome of the presidential election is. I'm going to be focusing on this for the remainder of my time in the Senate.
What I hear you saying, tell me if I'm getting it wrong, is that you can stop Donald Trump if he's commander-in-chief. Even if you're not leader, you're going to do the most you can to counter this isolationist worldview and to counter or limit what he could do if reelected.
I'm going to counter, no matter who's elected president, advocating things that I think are not good for America. What I care about is what does the person who actually gets elected ultimately do?
Should Mr. Trump, as candidate, as representative of your party, go and see Ukraine for himself?
I'm not going to give him any advice. I'm focusing on turning the Senate Republicans into the majority here and focusing on advocating, as I think I successfully did this very week, for moving away from the isolationist movement that began with Tucker Carlson.
It began with Tucker Carlson.
It did. He had a huge audience among rank and file Republicans, and I think it was very destructive, very impactful on regular Republican voters, and created a big problem.
Because he mimicked Republican propaganda and amplified it, and then that's been repeated on the House floor, as the House Intel chairman
Well,
said?
I certainly disagreed with him, and he certainly ended up where he should have been all along, interviewing Vladimir Putin.
Will you fact check Donald Trump when he says these things? Because he has also repeated some of these
I'm not
lines.
going to give any advice to our candidate in the presidential election. What I'm focusing on is turning the Senate into a majority Republican.
Our full interview with leader